We appreciate Elliot Clough of Hawkeye Beacon being with us today. And of course, Hawkeye fans are excited to hear the most recent report from he and his team over at Hawkeye Beacon regarding a potential add in the transfer portal. It is transfer portal season here in mid-December. Before we get to the most recent news and the report from Elliot himself, we do want to thank Iowa Floor Covering. Tyler, Brian, Ryan, and the guys down at IFC and Bondurant have been with us for a long time. And of course, we couldn't continue to do this program without them. Be sure you call Tyler, even if it's just to thank them for being a part of the show. And of course, they're servicing the central Iowa area and beyond. 515-379-7000, or you can check out their website, iowafloorcovering.com. Use the /DIY to learn more about how you can do it yourself with their do-it-yourself flooring. With that being said, we welcome Mr. Elliot Clough of HawkeyeBeacon.com, who's with us on kind of short notice here on a Wednesday afternoon because Hawkeye fans are buzzing on this Wednesday following a report from you and your team that Penn State transfer quarterback Beau Pribula is in Iowa City now. Is that the fair assumption at this point, Elliot?
Yeah, so I was told earlier today that he would be on campus this afternoon. That's my understanding for now. You think typically on these visits, official visits especially, they're there for a day, 2 days. So presumably he's staying the night in Iowa City, and imagine that he'll see practice while he's here. He'll probably have some meetings with Coach Lester, Coach Ferentz. Obviously get to see the facilities. May well have a meeting with Brad Heinrichs. Who knows how all the details go there, of course, but. Yeah, presumably he's still here.
Full disclosure for everybody watching this segment. Elliot and I chatted before we started recording. We really didn't go through any details, him and I. And so some things Elliot may say, hey, head over to HawkeyeBeacon.com for more information. Totally cool with that. We'd love to promote that great site. But also there may be things that Elliot just does not know. And I am not the Pribula person. You're a Pribula person right now, Elliot. So yeah. Congratulations on that title. That's a esteemed title, man. If he commits, fans are going to be flocking around your stuff. So congrats to you on that. So the report was made by a couple of national people, including Pete Nakos of On3 here earlier in the week, that Pribula would be interested in a few different schools, one being Mizzou, one being Central Florida, one being Iowa. Then the report came later that all those schools had been in contact. Kind of read between the lines of what Pete Nakos said earlier. We assumed that was the case at that point when he initially entered the portal. And it sounds like Pribula has already been to Columbia. Can you tell us about anything related to the lead up? I'm assuming he just took off via plane there and then came to Iowa City from there, or is this going to be the I don't know answer?
Yeah, those are safe assumptions. Yeah, I'm not positive. I would imagine he's according to a couple of the other sites, he's going to be in Indiana this weekend too, which that's going to be that'll be a fun visit for him, assuming so. But yeah, I imagine he's just doing a tour of the Midwest right now. I know our Missouri site, who is relatively new to the space, confirmed that he was on campus because of like an Instagram story from a family member. So that kind of stuff happens. But yeah, I would assume that he is just touring with the family right now, checking things out. Went down to Columbia and maybe drove, who knows, and then drove right on up to Iowa City. That's not a huge drive, So
yeah. And I promise we will get to the more like what we think about this fit. I talked with Mark Rogers yesterday. My next question I do want to ask you is, do we expect him to be at Nashville or is Iowa and Missouri? Like I would think if Iowa and Missouri are like maybe two of his three finalists, then maybe he waits until the bowl game to go check both those teams out at the bowl game. Maybe
whoever
not.
Win gets him, yeah.
Yeah, maybe stay with Trent Dilfer and Hank Brown's family and right. that kind of whole thing. But at the same time, these recruitment things, they work fast in the portal. And part of the reason why he entered when he did is because he didn't feel comfortable waiting until after the playoff was complete, which for Penn State may be after this week. That's what's insane about this is you could potentially stay with your team, Elliot. And I'm sure James Franklin would have allowed that. I can't speak to that personally. I've not had a conversation with James Franklin, but I would think he could have entered the portal and just waited. But guys are so concerned about getting homes. And so do you want to wait to take visits until after your team loses because you don't want your team to lose week 1. So I guess my question is, what's the timeline here? Do you have any idea on how soon we should expect a decision from Beau once he does his tour? Because it seems like the schools we just named, along with maybe Central Florida, are at the top of his list right now.
Now, I don't have an exact timeline, but I can give you an informed opinion. A lot of what you had just alluded to. And that's based in the fact that he is a quarterback, right? And there's only one on the roster that gets to play, the majority of the snaps. So that was a situation where he had to play the cards that were dealt to him. Like, this is completely at the foot of the NCAA, right? Like, to look at this and make any sort of criticism about Beau Pribula, in my opinion, it's just misplaced. So to me, you referenced the timeline. I would imagine it's something that gets done within the next week, 2 weeks. Okay. I would be surprised, because if it's something that he maybe communicates to the staff, like, I don't know if I want to make my decision until January 1st, what I imagine Kirk and Tim Lester would do, be like, okay, guess we're going to look at somebody else.
Fair. Yeah.
And yeah. I would think the other programs would do the same thing. Like, we're not on your timeline, dude.
That's why, and I've gone back and forth about the whole Nashville thing, and maybe that's more of just like a cutesy fantasy, like, oh, he's going to show up at the Music City Bowl and watch these two teams play. But the reality is, would he have done what he did, entering when he did, if he was planning on waiting? So I think it's a fair assumption what you're saying. It makes sense that we're probably going to get a decision before the bowl game, which is in 12 days. As it relates to the fit, what can you tell us about Beau? I mean, I've watched quite a bit of tape, went back and looked at his film against Wisconsin. And although they used him somewhat similar to how Iowa used Brendan Sullivan early this year, I do think he's got a better arm than people realize. But he'd just not been given an opportunity. It's been with that program, what was this, year 3 for him?
Yep.
So he's paid his dues at Penn State. What do you think about the fit? And is there anything you can tell us about priority-wise for Iowa? Is it just him, and who else is out there right now? Because Miller Moss is off the board. Connor Weigman's off the board. The Coleman kid from Richmond is still available, correct?
He is. Last I checked in with him, he hadn't heard from Iowa. Okay. I think he has a couple group of 5 offers, but nothing from Iowa. Right now, the way it appears to me is Pribula is their target. And if and when he goes off the board, they look elsewhere. Of course, I'm sure they've got feelers out. I'm sure they're looking at who else is on the board. But some things that I've said to our premium subscribers this week is, like, some of them have thought and said that, oh, Iowa's probably done at quarterback. They don't need a 6th quarterback. Well, 1, they're probably not going to have 6 by fall next year. 2, yeah, they're still looking, and the quarterback that they get or want may not even be in the portal yet. The portal closes, the opportunity to enter closes the 28th. Now, I felt more so that way, with over this last week. I'm feeling less so as we get closer at the end of the portal window closing, right? Or being open. But Pribula appears to me to be the guy that they want. And as far as fit that you referenced, I would probably say he's like a better version of Brendan Sullivan. That's the consensus seems to be he's a guy with that athleticism and the legs that Brendan Sullivan has, but a better arm. And I'm sure, and I've watched some film breakdown. Some of the decisions are a little iffy, but man, he can really sling it, and he's put it into tight windows. But not a super turnover prone guy. I mean, he's played a lot of football in 24 years. It's 24 years, 24 games, 24 games for Penn State. No starts, right? So there's a difference there with him and Hank Brown, but played, altogether a lot of football, right? Like he hasn't been the starter. That's been Drew Aller. So he's experienced in the Big Ten. He's played a lot of the competition that Iowa plays. I mean, if you can get him, you get him. Like it's that simple. I think if you want to keep Brendan Sullivan, if he wants to stick around, maybe you do some of that fun 2 QB stuff because you've got 2 athletes there. But yeah, I mean, if it's not Pribula right now, I still think that they're going to go out and try to get somebody else too.
And just for the record, if they were able to land Pribula prior to the bowl game, if I'm Brendan Sullivan, I am playing in that bowl game. I'm not entering the portal. I'm not doing that right now because we don't know what he's going to do in the bowl game. And to me, he's got an opportunity to at least convince Iowa of his startability in 2025, even over a Beau Pribula and a Hank Brown, or at the very least, convince other schools, even though you're going to be entering the portal late in the game. No reason, I don't think, if Pribula announces in 4 days that he's a Hawkeye, don't just let that week go by. I know guys feel that there's a sense of urgency here, and I get it. But that would be my advice, Brendan Sullivan. And what I've seen on tape, very similar to what you said, Elliot. Very similar legs. Brendan's a bigger guy, taller, right? Beau Pribula has some shades of Trace McSorley. I think they wore the same number at Penn State, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So that's part of when I watch him play. But he runs like Trace did. And Trace wasn't this amazing athlete, but obviously a really good college quarterback.
Yeah. So to revert back to Sullivan and some of the things you mentioned about him staying and playing in the bowl game, whether it's Pribula, whether they get somebody else, whatever, he doesn't strike me as a guy that would say, "Oh, Pribula's coming in, I'm hitting the portal." Like in all of my interactions, everything he said, I mean, he went to Iowa knowing he had a year of eligibility right after Cade left, but he went to Iowa when Cade was already there, right? He doesn't strike me as a guy that would up and leave, nor would he want to leave to go to a third school for his college football career. He's a guy that sticks out to me as someone that would stick around in the spring and compete for the job if he believes he has a shot at it.
He's also very close to his roommate, Jacob Gill. That could play a factor. I guess my last question is, do you have any feel for what these quarterbacks are costing? I mean, I know there's been numbers thrown out there, and I don't know that I've ever talked numbers. I'm sure you've been given figures about what it costs to get Cade McNamara in, as have I. I don't know what the market is for. I don't like. Did Hank Brown get some assurance of something coming here? Is Pribula in the, 6-figure range? Is he more than that? I mean, do you have any idea for fans who wonder what these players cost?
I really don't. Of course, you mentioned the numbers around Cade, and those have all been floated around 6 figures, what have you. I don't have a solid number. I would love to tell you if I had it. I can't imagine Hank Brown was that expensive, just given the circumstances. And the fact that he started just 2 games and
hope not.
Yeah.
Sure hope not.
And when it comes down to Pribula versus like a Cade, that's really tough because I think the prices have been inflated since Cade was brought into Iowa, 1. But 2, Cade had tangible success as a starter leading a team to the 4-team playoff, and it was Michigan, and that's a big stage. That's a lot of weight to carry as a starter. Now, he didn't light the world on fire, right? 15 TDs, 6 interceptions, I think, in the year that they went to the...
Yeah, his resume was a bit inflated based on
exactly
how he played before all the injuries and what was around him. Not that Pribula doesn't have great athletes around him, but a little bit different there. Yeah,
it is different. I don't think Pribula will cost as much as Cade did, but at the same time, I mentioned the inflation, and 2, you're going to be competing with a few schools, and Missouri's got some money. Like that's not a secret. Missouri, I mean, you don't land a player like Williams Nwaneri, even though he left after a year, who was, I think, the number 8 recruit in the country for us, maybe higher. He was a 5-star for us, ends up at Nebraska, but some of the recruiting wins they've had at Missouri don't happen unless you have some of that money, right? And they've got some recent success under Drinkowitz. And then, you look at UCF and living in Florida, that wouldn't hurt. Indiana, they've had some really, really awesome success there under Signetti this year, going to the playoff. So what is it? Supply and demand, right? Like it's that simple. If all 4 of these programs want him, that price is just going to go up and up and up and up and up. So, I don't have a number, but there are a lot of factors that go into this that could continue to raise that number to higher degrees.
And for the fans that say Iowa can't land good quarterbacks in the portal, or they're going to struggle against some of those programs you just named, one being Missouri out of the SEC. Missouri has also missed on some guys here early as it relates to quarterback. So, maybe they're in a similar, but I don't know. Again, we don't know what the numbers are exactly. There have been numbers, NIL budgets that have been floated around there. I don't know what to draw as it relates to accuracy of those, but We'll see. Beau Pribula, according to Elliot and his team over at Hawkeye Beacon, Beau Pribula is in Iowa City today as we record this on Wednesday, fresh off his visit to Mizzou. And then it sounds like he may be headed to some other schools, one being potentially Indiana. And then we'll see from there. Elliot, people can follow you at Elliot Clough on Twitter. And if you want to know how to pronounce it, it's Clough, like rough and tough. That's what he always says. And then at Hawkeye Beacon, also HawkeyeBeacon.com, which is part of the Rivals Network. Anything else that people need to know? Obviously, people can go over to your VIP board and your website for more information as this thing hopefully continues to transpire.
Yep, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe if you're not a subscriber yet. Otherwise, just head to Hawkeye Beacon and you'll find the opportunity to subscribe there. We will be monitoring this visit and updating our premium folks as things continue. And we're expecting another commit to happen here relatively soon out of the portal, as well as, some other options that I was looking at. So we'll have all that covered there at Hawkeye Beacon for our premium subscribers.
Elliot Clough, HawkeyeBeacon.com and Rivals. Elliot, always appreciate the time. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Corey.